Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Box. And today we're going to be talking about South Africa's next Dan Carter ? Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu, with comparisons once again arising between, for me, the greatest flower half to have ever played the game in Dan Carter and the next big thing, which is Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu. I'm going to be talking a little bit about whether the comparisons are fair, what sort of the different strengths are of the two teams, or two players rather, and whether or not Sacha could potentially even go on to eclipse somebody like a Dan Carter, who had one of the most ridiculous records ever as a flower half and as a player, really. And I think for me, goes down on top 10 best players of all time. Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu is a special player, and to be fair, whilst he is young and still got so much more to do in his career, there is a reason that there are comparisons coming up between him and Dan Carter, because I don't think we've seen a flower half look just as good as Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu at such a young age, at test level, so quickly. So that's what we're talking about. And the main thing I think for Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu is the fact that he's very new to Test rugby, and yet has already done some big things. And that is, he's played, 4 tests against the top 2 sides in the world within his first, I think, 8 tests that he's currently got. He's played against some really, really good teams already. He's played against the All Blacks twice. He's played against Ireland twice. And, for him to basically make his debut against Wales and then be thrown in against Ireland off the bench here shows you how highly rated he is. And, he shows moments, for example, just how competent he is. But I think, this last sort of few months really, once again, kind of reminds us of how special a player we have in Sacha. Now, in terms of the comparisons, Dan Carter was known as the best, basically all-around flower half, because being New Zealander, he always had a certain amount of flair to his game. He was always going to have it. He was deceptively quite quick. Wasn't the most physical of players. Wasn't somebody like a Hodge Pollard, for example. Big burly flower half that could make massive hits, but he was a very good defender. The thing for me about Dan Carter was his game manager was absolutely sensational. I don't think there's anybody that has made as good decisions when and as they needed as Dan Carter. He knew when to run. He knew when to kick the ball. And for example, and I think his tactical kicking was second to none. And that's what I think really made him the best all-round flower, was that fact that he understood when it was on, and when to keep it ball in hand, how to direct play, and then when it wasn't, or when he needed to, hard to kick. And he had every kick in the book, didn't he? He could kick for, obviously his kicking for goal was legendary, and 1,598 test points doesn't just happen overnight. And there was that historic 2005 game against British Irish Lions where he scored 33 or 48 points himself with 2 tries and some conversions and the likes of that, and a couple of penalties in they're throwing there as well. So, it kind of sort of showed you just how good an all-round player Dan Carter was. I don't think Sacha is quite the same mold as the type of player. I think that he's a very good all-round player, and I think that's the main thing that I suppose creates the comparison, is the fact that you don't look at his game and see an immediate deficiency. But I think his style of play is quite different. I think Sacha loves to have ball in hand. He absolutely loves having ball in hand. He chips over the top to himself. He'll take a line himself. He's got fantastic feet. And, I think he backs himself as a ball carrier, probably a lot more than Dan Carter. I do also think Dan Carter had a better tactical kicking game. I think that's something that comes with experience, though, in fairness. I think that's something that Sacha's really going to add to his game the more he plays. Decision-making and tactical kicking. Understand when and how to execute the right types of kick when he needs to. I mean, for example, even like Damian Valenza, for example, it's only in the last 2-3 years that we started seeing that almost like a bit of a trademark grabber in behind, where he understands when to try and find the space in behind. And that's something that Sacha's going to learn. But the main thing I think from a Sacha point of view is that he's got a goal kicking ability to potentially match Dan Carter's in terms of being an 80% plus kicker. And if you look at the stats, I mean, the stats that he's got to try, and this is the big thing. It's one thing talking about is he as good, but he's not going to go and have a similar career. And when we look at the stats now, it shows you Dan Carter was a different level. He's an absolute freak, really. I mean, if you have a look over here, and that for me, the biggest stat over there is to look at is the 88.4% win percentage. I mean, it's childish. To have played 112 games and won 88% of them is mental. It's absolutely mental. And again, records like 33 points in the 48-18 game against the British and Irish Lions. I mean, that's going and beating the best players across the British and Irish nations by 30 points, by 30 points, and he scored 33 of them, But that win rate, I don't think we'll ever see again, to be honest. I think things are far more competitive. I think Sash's sitting at about an 86% win at the moment. He's had a really good start, but if he's going to finish with that, that will be impressive. I think for me, the main thing is that Dan Carter lost just 12 matches in 112. In 99 matches won. I mean, that must really annoy him. But these are more the stats I'd like to look at. 1,598 test points scored, 29 tries, 293 conversions, 8 drop goals, 281 penalty goals. The interesting thing about Dan Carter and Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu is that they both made their debut against, if we get there, Wales. And both won their debuts. So there are a couple of fun comparisons like that. But if you look at Sacha, for example, he's 23 years old. He's got 8 caps so far, 52 points. So he's averaging, I think it's about 6 or so points per game. He'll need to obviously up those numbers if you're going to try and get to 1,598 points, because that is far more than 6 points a game. It's more sort of close to 12, 13 points a game. But I think the main thing is the fact that he's got 8 caps already, and I think he'll get plenty of caps so far this season. In terms of comparison and whether we can compare, at the end of the day, comparisons are there to stir conversation and to make life interesting, to be able to chat about someone like Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu and say, right, what can we compare him to? Because he's very different to what we had in South African flower halves. And the reason you always go to the Dan Carter comparisons is because Dan Carter is considered, alongside the likes of a Johnny Wilkinson, Johnny Sexton, the greatest flower half ever to play the game. Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu is the next big thing. So now we're looking at every generation has had the best flower half. Johnny Wilkinson back in 2003, Dan Carter after that for a good 10, 12 years. Johnny Sexton probably in the last sort of 4 or 5 years has been the sort of the outstanding sort of generational flower half. The next one, Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu. That's what people are basically saying. Now, I don't think, obviously, it's too early to start comparing, but there's a reason the comparison there, because we're talking about a player who at 23 years old just looks so composed. I think the best way of judging any flower is how much time do they look like they've got on the ball. And I've been very lucky to watch some phenomenal flower halves live during my time. I've watched Carlos Spencer, for example. I've watched Andre Pollard. I've watched Richie Mwanga. When you watch some of these players, I watched Johnny Sexton as well. I was really impressed with them. They just look like they've got time on the ball. And this is the big thing about Sacha. Whenever he's got the ball, he looks like he's got time. He's got time to look up and see there's space in behind. I can chip and chase. I can go for the cross kick. I can play a long pass. He can play out the back pass as well. His skill set is filthy. It's absolutely filthy. He can do everything. The question is, can he first of all stay fit? That's a big one at the moment. Can he stay fit? And if he can stay fit and can stay and play like this, he'll rack up 100 tests easily. And I think he could have a go at 1,600 points if he can play over 100 tests. And, we're now playing, I think, 15 tests this year. So, for example, 10 tests is not out the rounds possibility. And he plays 10, 11 tests for the next decade. He gets there, and that would only have him playing at 34, 35 years old if he can stay fit. Because an on-form Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu starts with the box every day of the week. He could start in a World Cup final tomorrow. I think he'd probably be okay. I don't know if we would start him in a World Cup final, but I think he'd manage. So the comparisons, too soon to say? Probably. But is there enough reason to warrant them? Yes, I think there is. Because I do think we're looking at a player that could become a Dan Carter-esque type of player. And I think that there is no threshold, I think, for how high he can go. I think we are talking about a player who could become the best player in the world. And that's why you're making those comparisons, because Dan Carter was at one stage the best player in the world and probably one of the best players of all time. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.